My name is William. I'm 90 years old. And 2 years ago, I finished knitting a gorilla, a real one, life-sized. It took me 847 days. People see it and they laugh. They take photographs. They ask me, "William, why on earth did you knit a gorilla?" And I always smile, because the answer is not a funny one. The answer is Margaret, my wife. She dared me to do it. She was sitting right there in that armchair, laughing the way she always laughed. And she said, "You can't even sew on a button, William. You'll never finish it." She was right that I had never knitted a thing in my life. She was wrong that I wouldn't finish it, but she never got to see it done. Margaret and I met in 1954. She was 22 years old. I was 24. She was standing outside a bookshop in the rain, trying to keep her bag dry and failing completely. I offered her my umbrella. She said, "I don't need rescuing, thank you very much." And then she took the umbrella anyway. We were married 11 months later, 63 years. 63 years of that woman. She was the loudest person in every room she walked into. Not loud in her voice, loud in her presence. When Margaret was there, you knew it. When she laughed, everyone turned around. She had opinions about everything, about politics, about food, about the proper way to fold a bath towel, about me, especially about me. She thought I was too serious, too cautious, too quick to say, "I can't do that," before even trying. She spent 63 years trying to fix that about me. I spent 63 years pretending she hadn't. She was right, of course. She was almost always right. I just never told her often enough. It was an evening in October. We were sitting in the living room the way we always did. Margaret knitting, me reading the paper, the television on, but neither of us watching it. She was working on something small. A hat, I think. Her hands never stopped moving. I looked up and said, "I don't know how you do that. All those stitches, I could never do it." And she looked at me over her glasses. That look. I knew that look. She said, "You could, you just won't try." And I said, "All right then. What should I knit?" She thought about it for a moment, and then that smile, that terrible, wonderful smile. She said, "A gorilla, a big one, life-sized." And she laughed. I laughed too. We both thought it was a joke. 3 weeks later, Margaret was in hospital. 6 weeks after that, she was gone. 63 years of marriage. And she left on a Tuesday morning in November, quietly, while I was holding her hand. The living room felt wrong after that. The armchair felt wrong. The television felt wrong. The silence where her knitting needles used to be, that felt worst of all. For 3 months after Margaret died, I didn't know what to do with myself. My daughter came to visit. My neighbors brought food. People were kind. But kindness doesn't fill a house. One morning, I don't know why, I went to Margaret's knitting basket. It was still where she had left it. I hadn't moved it. I sat down in her chair. I picked up her needles, and I thought about that evening in October, the gorilla, her smile, that terrible, wonderful smile. I went to the library the next day and borrowed a book on knitting. The librarian, a young woman, couldn't have been more than 30, looked at me and said, "Have you knitted before?" I said, "No, but my wife thought I should try." She helped me find the right book. She didn't ask any more questions. I was grateful for that. That evening, I sat down in Margaret's chair. I put on the television, not watching it, just for the sound. And I made my first stitch. It was terrible. Crooked and loose and nothing like it should have been. I made another one, also terrible. I kept going. And somewhere in the middle of all those terrible stitches, I realized I was talking to her. Not out loud, just in my head. "Look at this mess, Margaret. Are you laughing? I know you're laughing." 847 days. That is how long it took. I knitted in the mornings after breakfast. I knitted in the evenings after supper. I knitted on Sundays when the house was especially quiet. I got better. Slowly, very slowly, I got better. I learned about tension and gauge and yarn weight. I learned that gray wool is harder to work with than it looks. I learned that knitting a gorilla's fingers is the most frustrating thing a human being can attempt. I pulled it apart and started again 4 times. Every time I wanted to give up, and there were many times I wanted to give up, I heard her. "You can't even sew on a button, William." And I kept going. My grandchildren thought I had lost my mind. My son drove 2 hours one Sunday to check on me. He stood in the living room, looked at what was taking shape on the floor and said, "Dad, what is that?" I said, "A gorilla." He looked at it for a long time. Then he sat down on the sofa, and he said, "Mom would have loved this." Yes, she would have. The last stitch. I remember it exactly. It was a Wednesday morning, early. The light was just coming through the curtains. I pulled the yarn through for the final time. I cut it, I tied it off, and I sat back. And there it was, a gorilla, life-sized, 847 days of work. I sat in that chair for a long time, just looking at it. And I said, "There you are, Margaret. I finished it." I waited, the way you wait for someone to answer, even when you know they can't. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel the same kind of quiet as before. Before, the quiet had been empty. This quiet felt full. I don't know how else to explain it. It just felt full. People still ask me, "William, what are you going to do with the gorilla?" And I say, "Nothing. It stays." It stands in the corner of the living room, right next to Margaret's armchair. My grandchildren think it's hilarious. My son has stopped questioning it. The neighbors have gotten used to seeing it through the window. But here is what I want to tell you. Not about gorillas, not about knitting, about this. When Margaret dared me that evening, she wasn't really talking about a gorilla. She was saying what she had always been saying for 63 years. Try, William, just try. She knew she was running out of time to say it. I think she knew. And so she said it one last time, in the silliest, most Margaret way possible, with a dare about a gorilla and that terrible, wonderful smile. I am 90 years old. I have learned, better late than never, that the people we love leave us instructions. We just have to be paying attention. If someone in your life is still here, still laughing, still daring you, still telling you what you could do if you only tried, listen to them. Do the ridiculous thing they suggest. Knit the gorilla. You'll be glad you did.